Good to see you all, and glad to be with you once again for another Christian Witnesses of Jah live discussion, where we talk about things that mostly relate to the things that Christian Witnesses of Jah believe and do. And while that could apply in some sense to most of our videos here, since that's what the channel's about, these live shows that I try to do every Saturday evening, California time. We have people from around the world, though, so it might be morning where you are. Like where Betsy is. Good to see you, Betsy. And Henry. Looks like Henry's visiting New York. So he's about 3 hours ahead of me. I know I saw Bankhead here earlier, so I'm sure he'll show back up. But as I was saying, these shows are really where we try to focus mostly on what we're dealing with as Christian Witnesses of Jah. It could be beliefs, it could be our issues, mostly, things on how to worship God, follow the Messiah, treat others the way we want to be treated, right? How we can really effectively live what we believe and present it to others effectively and do what the Bible tells us we're supposed to do as Christians. TKS, nice to see you. So, anything can be discussed. We talk about a lot of things I think you'll find very interesting. Everett, good to see you. In fact, we're going to start with something here in just a moment that I think Everett brought up to me at one point. And that has to do with the history of, it's kind of, I'm going to say black people, even though as I've said repeatedly, I don't believe the descriptions black or white or any color reference to actual ethnicities is appropriate. We do it because we've been culturally indoctrinated, basically, to use those terms. And even black people, many that I have heard or spoken to, they kind of prefer that. It seems not all of them, not all. See, now you almost can't. This is what I'm going to get to. We're going to talk about some things related to the Bible and the history of black people, and like because of the recent discussion and talk about the Hebrew Israelites, the black Hebrew Israelites. This kind of goes back to, I think it was Everett that brought this up. You can correct me if I'm wrong, Everett, but I think you were asking about, in one of our shows, it came up about the history of the Egyptians, I think, and how there are references to them as black people. And I talked about how, as far as I have studied, the Egyptian people, other than Nubians, right? Because see, again, there's an interrelationship, there's a cultural, this is not a linear cultural development of just one ethnicity or color in areas like Egypt or in most other places, right? Even if we're going to get into things like, are the actual Hebrew Israelites black? And again, I don't believe that's an appropriate use. And I think that, in fact, if you want to consider something as systemic racism, I believe the use of black and white and brown, I guess, but mostly black and white, because brown often mostly refers, well, I guess even that too, right? Because it refers to a number of different ethnicities, often from South America. But it's the same with black and white. They're colors that are used to group together different ethnicities, often which have nothing to do with each other historically, but who look similar physically, I guess. And so we're grouped together in those ways: black, brown, white. And it's interesting that that's usually the only colors used in an appropriate manner, right? Or that are sort of approved. I think that's probably the best type of systemic racism we have, the best examples, what I mean. It reinforces this racial aggregation of ethnicities by color. And it's not even an accurate color for all the ethnicities, right? So I think it was Everett. Was it Everett? Yeah, it was Everett. He says, yeah. Talked about the history of black people. And the only reference I'm aware of historically that would refer to the area of the land of Egypt is the land of the black. There is a reference to that, and I don't have. I could look it up. You can look it up though. It's not like hard to find, and I don't want to get too off. But we'll talk about the. We're going to get into it for a few moments because as Christian witnesses of Jah, we need to be able to talk to each other appropriately, historically and culturally, understand the Bible, and with this recent increase in attention to the Black Hebrew Israelites, a lot of popular sports figures and entertainment figures like Kanye West, Kyrie Irving, and many others, right? So it can be confusing for you in ways that if you don't at least understand to some extent, you won't be able to talk about it. And you need to also be able to talk to other Christians, Christian witnesses of Jah, especially if you are considered black. And so you understand your potential historical relationship with the people of the Bible. Peoples, right? Really, because, but we're talking about the Israelites in terms of like the chosen people. This whole issue of the Hebrew Israelites often, the black Hebrew Israelites often gets caught up into this racial element of, I want to say supremacy, right? Of certain being special, right? They're the chosen ones. A lot of the black Hebrew Israelites who push this. And it, even though in the Bible the Hebrews are the chosen people of God, right? They're chosen by God and his special property. We're all sinners, and in the New Testament, that's not the deciding factor of whether or not we're approved or chosen by God, right? We're Jews of the heart. It's a circumcision of the heart. It's not based on an outward appearance. God is not partial, in every nation that fears him and works righteousness, God is acceptable to him. So it in terms of the New Testament, right? Now you may have some black Hebrew Israelites that contest certain parts of the New Testament because of this issue or others. So either way, right, we accept what the Bible teaches in terms of the agreed upon books that are historically most the best, basically, right? The most accepted because of their quality and relationship and textual history, the relationship with each other, figures of the past and their textual history. So we can get off onto that, but if we stay on the subject of what the Bible teaches, I think you can explain all of that. So let me just explain a couple of things I brought up though. So I kind of moved around on a few levels just to help explain why we're going to go in this direction for a moment. It's come up recently in discussions in the media and people's consciousness. I don't think it's going to go away. I think it'll become more discussed, right? Even Everett had brought it up to me. And now the black Hebrew Israelites have a lot of publicity. And again, notable figures like Kanye, Kyrie, and others believe this very strongly. And so how do we deal with that, right? It's kind of a sensitive issue because I think it would be wise not to deny black Hebrew Israelites claim that they have a, how should we say, a cultural, ethnic relationship to the Hebrew Israelites of the Bible. We don't need to deny that. And I don't think we should completely because, well, let me show you. Let's go to the Song of Solomon. We'll talk about this for a few moments because it's important for us to be able to talk to people as this becomes more discussed, to understand the Bible, and to talk to our children and other people about things. All right, so let's go to the Song of Solomon. I'll bring you guys up here. We'll do this together. Right. So if we go to verse 5, I think it's important that we even acknowledge to black Hebrew Israelites that probably they do have some cultural, ethnic association with the Hebrew Israelites of the Bible, because there's no reason to believe that the people called the Hebrews didn't intermingle with other ethnicities, including what we'll refer to as more as black or accepted African dark-skinned ethnicities, right? Because in Africa you have some regions that are populated with lighter skinned ethnicities, and then you have darker skinned ethnicities. And usually it would be in areas where, where it's more deserty. It seems like historically and culturally that's more the country and area where darker skinned people lived. Not entirely, but even as you'll see here in the Song of Solomon. So there's really nothing out of place with believing the Israelites had darker skinned people among them, or that even, right, we know that, as I mentioned before to Everett, the historical reference to the land of the black, the Egyptians, I believe is a reference to the dark soil of the Nile. I'm not aware of an actual reference to Egyptians as black, as being referred to as in terms of that color. But I would not deny that the Egyptians intermingled with darker or black skinned people in Africa. In fact, I know they did, right? We have the Nubians and others, and we have depictions of black Egyptians and light skinned Egyptians historically. So there's not, again, as I mentioned earlier, this monolithic one culture of color of people, even among Egyptians or Israelites. Because let's move into the discussion of the Israelites, right? We know at times they were kept pure, but even from the Exodus, right, they had many Egyptians and others that went with them, or people from Egypt that went with them. And then we also know that at some point we had the diaspora, the dispersion of the Israelites. We had numerous occasions where the Israelites obviously were taken captive and were part of other national groups, right? And so we know that that's what also develops different ethnicities among broader cultural lines of peoples, right? So even blacks today, right, could find people in their history that are probably considered white, because that's just how races intermingle in ways. So to deny that there's an actual racial ethnicity or part of it as being black in terms of the nation, the Hebrews, would probably not be accurate at all. Now, to what extent it would be consistent with the black Hebrew Israelites? Well, again, so you have these different historical racial interminglings. You have, even with the Jews, the diaspora, right, where they were dispersed among the Greek peoples, the Hellenistic period, so much so that we have the Bible translated in an Indo-European language, and even considered scripture Greek, right? So we have very clear and long periods where the Hebrews intermingled with Indo-Europeans and also with Africans or darker skinned Africans. I don't see any of this as improbable, and I see it as all very defensible historically, just based on what I said, that I could go into more detail to define if I had to. But getting back to the issue of the black Hebrew Israelites and how we should try to approach them and what our understanding is biblically, right? So what I just said, I think, is important to keep in mind. But I think we can actually engage the black Hebrew Israelites and say, look, I think it's probable, it's likely to me that the Hebrews had involvement with what we'll call black ethnicities in Africa, so that their ethnicity is not a monolithic, non-black culture. Look at the Song of Solomon, right? So In the New International Version, it says, "Dark am I, yet lovely, daughters of Jerusalem. Dark like the tents of Kedar," right? And some translations say black. King James Bible, "I am black, but comely." Comely means beautiful. "O ye daughters of Jerusalem," as the tents of Kedar, right? And she's considered like the most beautiful woman of all of them, right? So we clearly have, now this is someone who was in, I would cite this to the Black Hebrew Israelites and say, this is your best, I think, in the Bible, this is the best evidence to show that there is a darker skinned ethnicity element to the cultural and ethnic line of what we call Hebrews. Because obviously, it goes on in verse 6, "Do not stare at me because I am dark, because I'm darkened by the sun. My mother's sons were angry with me, made me take care of the vineyards. My own vineyard I had to neglect." So it seems like someone, right, the darkness or blackness, in Hebrew, it's the word shachor, kind of like Tupac Shakur, but it's shachor. And then in Greek, it's melas. So it pretty clearly does mean black or dark, right? Black. And it's associated with being darkened or blackened by the sun. So to me, that seems pretty clear that this is someone who was brought to Solomon, brought to Israel from one of the darker ethnicities and regions where the sun is more prevalent in ways that is associated historically with darker skinned people. That's pretty much what I believe is responsible for the melanin and development of darker skinned people, and the levels of melanin that are attributable to the pigmentation of their skin as it relates to where they developed, darker skinned people developed or lived, which was mostly in a very sunny region, which is opposed to the lighter skinned Europeans, the more northern, non-sunny areas, by comparison to Africa, it's responsible for their lighter skin development. Again, there's no real monolithic color here. And even the colors themselves, I don't think are correct. I'm not white. If you look at white, like white, what you see around the words in the text on the screen, that's white, right? This is white. I'm not white. I'm beige. And most people are not the color black or brownie, right? Well, there might be some that fit in one way, but it's not a monolithic, it doesn't apply to everybody who would be considered those colors, like I just showed with myself. And I think that use of colors is really the best evidence of systemic racism we have. We have been culturally taught to believe or refer to ourselves and others by color, no matter what the ethnicity, no matter whether you're related at all historically. If you look a certain way, you're considered white. If you look a certain way, you're considered black. I don't see how that's not racism. You're basically ignoring everyone's ethnicity and instead grouping them together as if they're the same by color. How is that not racism? It doesn't help anyone. It ignores everyone's actual history and culture and is used as a tool to divide people who probably have nothing to do historically with the issues that are used as a means of division, right? So, and that often with the Black Hebrew Israelites, they're very sensitive, right? Because obviously the issues in this country is historically with slavery, even though I believe the United States and Great Britain, two countries that were involved in the West Atlantic slave trade, brought an end to it much earlier than people want to give us credit for, whereas all these other nations were continuing to do it. So while the United States participated, most states, or the same number, banned slavery domestically and internationally, even from the time of the Constitution and thereafter. And then once slavery was banned as an international trade practice in 1808, that's when it was official. I was actually done a year or two earlier. Then thereafter, of course, we had the additional states being added to the Union, this constant, increase in division over slavery, and the continued illegal slave trade, right, with the southern states and even people in Britain. But as in terms of the governments, they had brought an end to it. And then they gradually continued to bring an end to it, not just in their own countries, but all throughout the world. Why isn't the United States and Great Britain given credit for that? Now, all these other countries did the same things. Even the West African peoples were the ones who were selling their peoples, although other countries like Britain and others were also taking slaves. But then you also had the pirates, the black pirates of North Africa and West Africa, who enslaved numerous quote unquote white peoples. So you could look at this in so many ways, right? Not to mention the fact that 10% of the West African slaves came to the United States versus 90% going elsewhere. No one talks about that. We just have a lot of inaccurate information that it makes people emotional. And so you have to be careful how you talk to, especially groups like Black Hebrew Israelites. They can get very sensitive over racial issues. But I think engaging them and saying, you know what, I believe it's pretty clear there is involvement with Black people and the Hebrews, even Solomon right here, right? And so I don't know for sure. Probably Solomon had, right? If this was the most beautiful woman and she's Black, probably she wasn't the only one Solomon had around. And Solomon had many wives and women, concubines approved by Jah. So the nation developed and the line of the Messiah was brought forth. So it's not unreasonable to me at all that actual Black, quote unquote, dark-skinned African ethnicities were intermingled with whoever the Hebrews that were freed from Egypt were originally. So I think that's an effective way to do it. I would also say that probably this very same account, right, that associates the Black woman with Solomon and the Blackness of the woman with being blackened by the sun, right, showing she's probably clearly from a different area. I'm not saying it's not sunny in Jerusalem, is it, right? But there's clearly a difference being spoken of here, is there not? Where her color is directly associated with an area that's affected by the sun that doesn't seem to be similar to the people in Jerusalem, right? Which are referred to right here. In verse 5, dark am I, yet lovely daughters of Jerusalem, dark like the tents of Kedar, like the tent curtains of Solomon. There seems to be a difference here between this Black woman and the women of Jerusalem, right? She stands out. She's different from them. She's been blackened by the sun. And she's the most beautiful woman of all, according to Solomon. So it's something that's not only likely, in my opinion, but that doesn't present an issue at all. I think it's very clear also that other ethnicities also intermingled and interbreeded, became a part of the ethnicity that we refer to now as Jewish or Hebrew, right? Very clear involvement with the Hellenistic world. So now, but the Black Hebrew Israelites want to go back to the original time, and of course being freed by Moses, and everyone was Black, right? So they get very firm about this, everyone being Black at this time. They go overboard, and it doesn't really fit the information we have that shows that yes, there were no doubt black ethnicities as part of the development of the Israelites, but that's not how they're referred to in the ways that would suggest that that's how they were completely all the way back. Doesn't seem that that was also the case with the Egyptians either, although there were times when there were black ethnicities that ruled Egypt. So, but that also again to me shows, right, the Nubian kings, that the Egyptians that weren't Nubian probably weren't as black as the Nubians, and they're not depicted as black either in paintings that we have from various periods of Egyptian history. So I wanted to go over this. I hope it was kind of helpful to you in understanding a lot of the recent publicity and stuff that we've gotten from certain black Hebrew Israelites. And also, right, if you are a black ethnicity or you know black ethnic people, right, we have to use these terms now because they've been culturally embedded in our thinking, black, white. I don't like them and I don't think they're correct, but there's almost no way that they're at least not considered pejorative completely, so we can use them without becoming a problem. But we do want to try to have an understanding of things so that we can discuss these things calmly, right, with people who want to talk. And if you find yourself talking with black Hebrew Israelites or others who are very passionate about their ethnicity and color, then in terms of the Bible, I think this information can be helpful to you. Song of Solomon, the different historical associations between black and non-black people, right? Ethnicities, but I'm going to black, different black ethnicities and non-black ethnicities, and even Indo-European ethnicities over time. So ultimately, it doesn't really matter to us, though, right? We're Christians. We're not. We recognize every color or ethnicity is in God's image. No one on the earth is not in God's image if you're a human being. And color is not something the Bible ever says we are supposed to use or someone's outward appearance or ethnicity. Right? We're talking about Christianity and the Bible as a whole. We're not the Hebrew nation being guided through the wilderness to try to establish itself so the Messiah can be born. We're past all that. The two people have become one, the Gentiles and the Jews. One flock, one shepherd. There's neither Jew nor Greek, neither male nor female. They didn't even use black or white there, right? Or even light or dark, right? That's not how they referred to each other. They referred to their actual ethnicity back then, most often. Although we do have references here, don't we? Where the color of the person's skin is described for us in a way that we can kind of show this historical cultural interplay in a way that allows us to, I think, effectively engage black Hebrew Israelites, not deny what they're claiming to us, but not fully embrace it either, but embrace it to the extent that the Bible and history show us. Who cares, right? I mean, whatever people they are, whatever people we are, we should be trying to please our Father and get along with each other. All this other stuff is vanity, right? And usually a cause for division. All right, so I wanted to go over that briefly because it's been coming up more and more. It had come up once before, and I had only briefly mentioned that one reference to the land of the black when I was talking to Everett. So I wanted to get in a little bit more so you can actually talk to these people effectively now that you've kind of seen the discussion in terms of what we talked about historically and the development of peoples, in particular the Hebrews, and also how in the Bible people are described in ways that show both a cultural historical interplay and a separation based on region, and specifically regions that affect people mostly by the sun. So I hope that was helpful. Let me see if anyone had any questions. And GL, thank you for the super chat. I appreciate that. Okay, so I guess I made sense, right? If you have any questions on that, I didn't want to I just wanted to kind of give a brief summary and overview. I think it's not something we really have to get too technical with. I think the issues are pretty clear. And so hopefully that's helpful to you and you can use it to discuss it. Issues of race and color with people who are interested in the Bible more effectively. And then let's see, let me bring up the NWT. We will be partaking also, so stick around for that. We usually, like I said, this is a Christian Witnesses of Jah live discussion show where every Saturday, to the extent that I can, and if I can, I put a notice up. So if you haven't subscribed, you might want to do that. Push the notifications bell, and then you'll see if we're going to actually meet. I put a notice up like earlier today, like 7-8 hours earlier, I think. So you would have had plenty of notice and hopefully been able to arrange things. And then if I'm not going to do it, I also put a post out or something and say, hey, we're going to do it next week or something. But we try to do this so that we can maintain our association. We can keep our community together, talk about important issues, sensitive subjects. How will we deal with this? Or how can we worship better individually and together? And then also partake, right? Do the Christian ritual, the thing we're told to do, to remember the Messiah and what he did for us, and to proclaim his coming, that he is going to return for us, judge the earth, and bring honor to his Father's name. Right? He's going to write upon us the name of his God, make us a pillar in the temple of his God, and we will be with them and bring about a new earth that will restore glory to his footstool, just as it has been restored to his throne in heaven, right? Got rid of the devil, all the demons, they're no longer there. Thrown out, defeated by the Son of God. Well, let's see here. GL asks, are you familiar with the colored people claim that Indian Americans are not the original Americans, but nomadic people from Mongolia? The blacks are originally the native land, according to. I've heard a lot of these things. And obviously we can't spend all our time. I guess maybe you could try, but I certainly can't spend all my time following up on every single claim because it's not important to me. Historically, that's not what the Bible, that's not what Jesus said. In the Bible, who's the most special person? Who's number one? Jesus, right? First in all things. He's number one. How did he act? Number one became number none because that's what we all are ultimately. Nothing. No one is good but the Father. The Father is the source of everything. The Son only does what the Father does. It's all about the Father. The Son is important, of course, because of what he went through and did for us. That was because of the Father, though. The Father's the one who said to do that. The Father sent him. He didn't come of his own. It was the Father. The Father sent him. So, nevertheless, he's the one through whom all things were made, right? The heir of all things. The one who was there with the Father, created as the beginning of his way, joyful before him all the time, glad before him, witnessing all the things that were being done, being used to put things together. Doesn't get any more special than the firstborn son, right? Of course, I'm leaving God aside, right? So if it's a question of who's special and who's chosen and who's original. I'll get back to Gio's specific question in a moment, but just to wrap this whole thing up in a broader sense, you want to be special. You want people to think that you're chosen according to the Bible. Then why aren't you washing people's feet? Why aren't you doing the things that the one who is greater than everyone, chosen more than anyone, special more than everyone, why aren't you doing what he did? Why are you acting like you're so special? Because if you are so special, you're supposed to be showing that the way he did. And if that's what he did, and you're not more special than him, probably if you're not doing what he did, we shouldn't take you too seriously, right? It's not really a question of what your ethnicity is or your color. If you're not doing the things that the most special and chosen one of us all did, I don't really care how special you are. Who cares? You're not following the master. So you're probably not as special as you think you are. And if you really are, then prove it. Start doing what the master did. You want to consider yourself a special person or a chosen race or color or whatever, and you're a Christian saying that? Okay. Then I better see you doing the things that the one who's far more special than you or me did. Even if you don't want to. He didn't come of his own will. He tried to appeal to the Father to let this cup pass. So you may not want to wash someone else's feet. Maybe not if they're not a part of your chosen race or color. You might want to think about the master. You might say, well, I'm only going to do that with the people who are true followers of Jesus, the true Hebrew Israelites. Well, what does he say through the illustration of the Good Samaritan? Are you out there helping people who have been beaten and cast aside at a minimum, who aren't of your race or color? There are ways that we can determine if you really are acting like a chosen person. You want to be chosen, lower yourself. You want to be great, become the least. That is an explicit teaching in the text of the Master. As far as these other issues, Everett, I appreciate that. Let me see. Okay, let me get to that in a second. I'll get to that Isaiah text in a second. But to GL, are you familiar with the colored people claim that Indian Americans color? I don't know what you mean by colored people, GL. I'm sure you mean it in a good way. So I in no way take that as a negative. But I'm a colored person, right? I mean, I never understand. I understand a lot of darker skinned people sometimes use colored. And I know historically white people use that too. But more today, I hear people of color usually used by darker skinned people. And to the exclusion of people like me, right? Well, what am I not a color? Even if I was white, is white not a color? Well, again, it's all this exclusionary, racist language that's designed to segregate people, right? And so aggregate and separate, right? People that really have no ethical relationship, if they're similar looking, then they group them together. It can be just a terrible trap for people. It can divide people. I think that's what happens to the Black Hebrew Israelites is they get so caught up into this. They may have like some issue that they just don't think is being given enough attention, like the way we talked about it. So it bothers them more in some ways. It makes them, in some sense, I think, go overboard. But either way, these things are divisive. These things can really tear people apart and whole societies, right? We have to be very careful. That's why I wanted to get into it a little, because not talking about it, right? Not engaging, for example, a Black Hebrew Israelite who's very passionate about these things. Well, they're just going to think you don't really care. Right? Our style is not to avoid issues. We don't want to overdevelop or overengage people over the wrong thing or waste time. But certainly we want to talk about it to the extent that would be appropriate and learn something or share something. So as far as GL's claim is so colored, I don't know. I would imagine you mean darker skinned people like most do today, but I object. I object to that, GL. I'm a colored person. Indian Americans are not original Americans. Well, okay, so remember, if we believe in the Bible, we believe in the flood, right? So the whole earth was depopulated. Now, you might be able to argue that people after the flood went back or ultimately inhabited regions that may not have even been populated ever, and so they were the first inhabitants, the natives, so to speak. Who was first there and ultimately how they developed as a people or culture, I guess can have some significance. But in the Bible, I don't think it really does, right? God brought the Hebrews to Canaan, displaced them, and gave them the promised land. You might be able to argue that they were originally there ultimately. But I don't think God really cares about that. He cares when it's his purpose, right? He wants a people there to do a certain thing. That's what's going to happen. But it doesn't make that place forever special. And that clearly isn't the case, right? We've seen that. We can see what has happened to these different locations over time, right? If Jah doesn't build it, and even if he does build it, he can destroy it. But if he doesn't build it, it isn't going to last. So everything here is temporary. And as far as these people that want to claim, right, who was here originally in terms of Americans, it looks like, I don't think we really know that definitively, like who were the first inhabitants after the flood, right? Because we're talking after the flood. So we're talking probably 45 to 5,000 years ago. That's when everything changed, right? That's after that period, and right at that period, that's when you start to get language. That's when you get astronomy. That's when you get metallurgy, the things that define our species, basically, right? Humans described as being created in the Bible in the image of God. So after the flood, it probably would have taken, several hundred years, maybe at least, for some people to occupy, as the Bible says, the islands and different places after the Tower of Babel, right? After the Tower of Babel, that's when all these different people settled elsewhere after the flood and began to develop the way they are now. So I'm not sure. It's theorized, I think, as you're alluding to, that there was sort of a bridge, a land bridge between Asia and Alaska that allowed people to migrate, or they just took ships and migrated. Right? Mormons believe that the Jews ultimately came and settled here, but I think that's been disproven by DNA testing. So it's possible that people from Asia migrated. It's possible that people from European areas or African areas migrated either to South America or North America much earlier than we think. But in terms of like development, it's hard to say. Certainly, if you we have older peoples from in South America, like the Olmecs, that probably go back to the earliest people, either after the flood or maybe pre-flood. And you have Aztecs minds that developed from them, right? Incans. Probably those people also migrated to some extent northward. And so if I just look at it geographically, right? So you would have the potential of people coming from East Asia, and then people coming from South America, who probably migrated after the flood from Africa and European countries, or possibly also from East Asia, right? So these things happen fast, right? We're talking decades, centuries, even millennia of time. A lot can happen and did. So I think a lot of those theories are possible and may even be a combination of them, so that you didn't just have one development. Even with the Native Americans, right? You had different tribes. Probably they were different peoples that migrated and so were separated by tribe because they weren't related directly. And so that would explain a lot of the division and differences between them. A lot of Native American war. I mean, this that was before the Europeans came. The Native Americans, there was great division and war among them. So probably that had a lot to do with developing regionally from different locations. I'm going to speculate, but that seems, based on the evidence, likely. So pre-flood, yeah. So okay, so in before the flood, right? You had Adam and Eve from the Garden of Eden after they were thrown out, and then you had the development of peoples, and so you had the whole earth populated, right? That's why God says the whole earth has become ruined. So I believe the earth looked different. I believe the earth today looks like a bear and an eagle fighting over prey. South America and Africa are two fish. The bear often being in the stream area where the water's coming down over the rocks, getting the fish, right? You can see images. I even have some streams and videos, right? The fish in the air with the bear's mouth open, just like you can see in the European image. And then you have the clouds in the sky. You have the blue that is both the sky for the eagle, North America, and the water for the bear, with South America and the eagle's talons, the fish, and the bear grabbing and about to bite on the fish that is Africa, right? Two beasts fighting over prey. I believe that's what Jah left the earth, the shape of it, in after the flood when he pulled the waters back. He knew what the earth's condition would be and he marked it just like that. Before that, right, we had the whole earth that in some sense became populated with humans and the Nephilim and the sons of God who descended to the earth and who began taking daughters of men, creating Nephilim, establishing regions, right? So you can see, like, for example, the Rishat structure in West Africa, right? The Eye of the Sahara, Atlantis. The history states that Poseidon created that location for his wife. So you had the whole earth being developed and dominated by the sons of God, the humans at that time, the Nephilim. The book of Enoch describes Michael and his angels going around and seeing all this terrible stuff. So the pre-flood world was developed and established by the sons of God and the Nephilim and the humans after the flood. That's why you see monuments like off the coast of Taiwan or Japan, the Yonaguni Monument, that's sunken below the ocean with that massive face and stone slabs and steps. And then you have all these other ancient locations, and even the pyramids and Sphinx in Egypt, I would argue. Göbekli Tepe, right? These places that were once above land that were totally buried either by water or by sand. So the earth transformed, just like the Bible says. For months, the waters that were broken open and loosed upon the earth were raging, devastating the earth, it says, destroying it. So the pre-flood world, we have monuments from it, but very little, right? It's hard to say it was so devastated, right? That's why we get we have different layers of the earth with different fossils that create problems for a lot of archaeologists with the whole timeline of the dinosaurs and things, which I'll get to more later. I talked about once in an open session. But the pre-flood world was totally different. And then after the flood, the Bible says the ark landed in Ararat, right? And then the descendants of Noah populated that whole region and descended down into the region that we refer to as Mesopotamia, right? Sumer. And then they settled in the area where they built the Tower of Babel. And then Jah and the angels went down and confused their languages. And the Bible, in the Septuagint, it says they went off, and it's a little bit different than the Hebrew. They went off into every island and place after the Tower of Babel. And this is where all the different languages and peoples were developed culturally and historically. So that would have been about 5,000 years ago where this started. So probably by 4,000 years ago, right, you would have had a lot of people in South America and probably North America, even 1,000 or 2,000 years BCE. Certainly, I think probably by 1,000 BCE. I think you could show, right? I mean, the dates they give sometimes to some of these cultures, like I said, the Olmecs and the Mayans. So the Olmecs are probably the oldest defined or identified culture in South America. You don't hear about them a lot, but they're pre-Incan, pre-Mayan. They even have features that look African American. Let me bring one up, right? So this is what I was saying. If you look culturally and historically, it's hard to say where all these different people came, right? So these are the Olmecs. This is the oldest civilization, I believe, in South America. Let me bring this up for you guys. Right? So so you can see here, the Olmec colossal heads are stone representations sculpted from basalt boulders, range in height from 1 to 3.5 meters. The heads date from 900 BC, right? Just like I said, about 1,000 years BCE. A feature of the Olmec civilization of ancient Mesoamerica. Look at the heads. What do those look like? I mean, you know, we all have different racial features and characteristics, right? Some races and ethnicities have different shaped noses, different shaped lips, different shaped eyes. You know, I'm seeing kind of a combination of features. This head here, this big one, to me, that looks a little African American, right? It looks a little more African American than it does Latin American today in a modern reference sense. Now, this one here, this one right to the lower right of the big one on the left, that one looks a little more Asian, doesn't it? It's got a little more narrow eyes, a little more narrow lips. So, you know, when it comes to this question, let's see if we can get some more images. So we've got evidence of cultures and civilizations 1,000 years BC in South America. So it's hard for me to believe that at some point some of these cultures would not have migrated north to some extent and established themselves regionally. And then you would have had also, again, probably migration from East Asia and from Europe and West Africa. To me, it's possible the Olmecs represent an early ethnicity or civilization that migrated from Africa, where there were, of course, peoples after the flood, right? We have the peoples descending down into Sumer, as I said, down into Egypt. And then it looks like, right, that was an area that was populated before the flood, hence the Sphinx was buried. We still don't know how the pyramids were made. There's a lot of questions surrounding some of the monuments in Egypt that appear to make them pre-flood, like the Sphinx surroundings, right? And it's believed that Egypt was, of course, more lush and different at one point. But I believe the Olmecs here might represent a migration from Africa after the flood that then was partially responsible for some of the South early American tribes. Right. And then let me show you, I was going to show you the Sphinx. Look at the, let me show you, we should be able to get a view here. Well, you can kind of see it in this image here, but it's not, so you can see here, look at that erosion around the Sphinx. Remember, when they first found the Sphinx, it was buried, right? They saw the head, and it was completely buried. Look at the surrounding of the Sphinx, right? Not only do you have the high erosion, but look at the area surrounding the Sphinx right here. Look at this one right below my face. That's water erosion. Those lines, those marks, right? You can see the water where it runs down the sides of these rocks. And this is very similar to water erosion patterns you see anywhere that there's a depression where water runs down and it gradually erodes lines of travel around more hardened surfaces. Look at that. That's some pretty massive erosion, wouldn't you agree? So we have this massive erosion. We have Göbekli Tepe, right? That was buried completely in sand. And people are insane enough to believe that humans buried it. Right? Who would take the time to spend the time to build a monument like Göbekli Tepe and then bury it, right? You're gonna bury this for what? Why was it no longer useful? Why was it so important to erect all these massive stone markers that just happen to depict the very same images describing the animals to be loaded in the ark in the Bible, and describes development and reproductive processes like that you see with the bird holding the egg and it hatching and growing in phases? That seems like a holding place for animals and species. So they made this place. How they made it, no one can explain. It has no historical reference in any known literature or peoples. This seems clearly to be a pre-flood structure. They date it like 10,000 years old based on sediments. Look at all the sediment that would be here. Sediment that, if this is from the flood, would be washed from around everywhere. And even if it was buried before the flood, some of the sediment could be from trees or living things that died and were deposited in the soil surrounding this area. Their use of sediments to date, right? The amount of different sediments you could date at a place like this is... So That's why a lot of these dates aren't peer reviewed. They're just given from the field and based on specific samples that aren't checked with other samples across the site. Now, a lot of it might be from the same place, right? Because if you had a massive flood, a lot of sediment would be deposited at one time. I don't see how you could claim that this was buried by humans. And even if that's, of course, possible, right? Look at how massive this place is. So they went through all the trouble to build it, and you mean to tell me they couldn't find one use for it after they were done with whatever they were doing with it? And you mean to tell me they spent all that time to bury it? I think the same thing that happened to the Sphinx is what happened to this. That the same thing that moves massive amounts of sand, i.e. water, rolled right over this and buried it. And we have evidence, as I have shown. Let me bring up a video that I posted on one of my community posts from Bright Insight, right? That showed the massive ripples, right? Miles apart, massive, thousands of feet high, or hundreds of feet high. I have to check to see how high again. But that are inconsistent with anything other than a massive flood that was rolling across the area continuously, just like the Bible describes happened for months. Here it is, right? I posted this video and also talked about it. But you can see right here, look right below me, right? See where it says not sand dunes? Look at that little square picture on the bottom right. Those are massive ripples right on the west coast of Africa, in Mauritania, right near Atlantis, which you can see right above that red square, the reshot structure. Just totally wiped it out. I had one guy try to tell me on my Göbekli Tepe video that there'd be a bunch of stuff washed into Göbekli Tepe. No, it would all been washed out because of the massive floodwaters that were there. And of course, there can always be bones and tools buried before the flood. But just like you see here, the reshot structure was completely wiped across. It had other features and things described even by Plato. But now you only see the subterranean structure, the substructure. And similar with Göbekli Tepe, although it was buried and the stone monuments themselves survived. But look at those massive ripples. Right? These are small ripples that we see every day, right? Well, now we're talking massive ripples you can see from space. And this very video also showed that this occurred within the last 10,000 years because it wiped off volcanic ash that is identifiable and documented in this video and elsewhere by geologists. So something completely scrubbed the volcanic ash that's dated to within 10,000 years and created these massive ripples and buried Göbekli Tepe and buried the city that's sunken at the top of the highest navigable body of water in the world, in the mountains of Peru, Lake Titicaca. We have evidence within the past 10,000 years, based on geologic evidence and proof, that massive flood waters were rolling across this earth. And so my theory about Göbekli Tepe has evidence that it was buried by these same flood waters that created these ripples you can also find in places like North America, that are evidence of the very flood that is consistent not only with Göbekli Tepe being buried by sand, but with the use of Göbekli Tepe described in the Bible. All right. So hopefully that's good information for you. You should use this video. It's proof. The ripples and the scrubbing of the volcanic ash within the past 10,000 years of a massive flood totally destroys the argument of people who claim otherwise. All right. Let me bring you guys back up here. Hopefully that answers. I think Everett was asking me about pre-flood stuff, so that's how we kind of got on that. But it's important that you have information you can use and share with others, right? We can't get into every single discussion and issue, but if you can set aside a couple powerful, undisputable pieces of evidence. People can be free to dispute them, right? But they don't have credible evidence to dispute them, and it's just their claim otherwise. Like abiogenesis, right? Not one example. And it's actually put forth as a scientific theory. Incredible. Instead of just accepting the scientific conclusion that life only comes from life and so therefore must be eternal. So stop arguing with us about how God could be uncreated, okay? Life's here. End of story. Miroslav and Thas, the quaking mess. You're going to have to explain that to us one day, Thas. Okay. Let me just see if I didn't miss anything. Probably did, but I'll try to go over everything since you're all here. I really appreciate you guys being here tonight. Thanks for the super chats too, Everett, GL. Not necessary, of course. I appreciate it. When I like things too, I often will contribute, but you do not need to. And oftentimes I don't. So don't feel bad if you don't. Do what you feel compelled to do. And as long as you're here, I'm very happy. If you're learning, I'm happy. Because that's what we're here to do. We're here to learn and to grow as a community of people, to educate each other so that we can reach more people and continue to grow as a group of people that don't require more than three things: belief and acceptance in Jah, the one God of the Bible, the Father, the Messiah, the Son of God, Jesus, the sent forth one, the firstborn of all creation, temporal term, no exceptions, defined for us in the Bible. So, and the golden rule, right? We keep it very simple, but it's enough to protect us and to help us determine whether or not someone is good association for us. And even if they believe those things, maybe they won't be. You have to determine that, right? Just like Paul and Barnabas, just like anybody. That does not determine the truth, though, just because you can't get along with someone, or I don't get along with someone, or we had a falling out. No, you go that way, I go this way, and we both continue to teach the truth. Okay? We leave each other be if that's the case, and we do what we are here to do. And hopefully we can do it together, right? We don't have to have the same type of problem they did. But let's not make more than they did about things that can happen. We all know that. It's just when it actually happens, we're like, I can't believe this is happening. Yeah, I know, because this rarely happens. So it's like, it's easy to talk about, not so easy to do. Huh? Well, we have to be able to do the do part. And not just the talk part, right? And it's not that hard as long as you're willing. As long as it's what you want to do. If you want to treat people fairly, well, that's what you're going to do. And if they don't treat you fairly, well, then you limit your association so you don't get taken advantage of. If you want to promote the Messiah, then that's what you're going to do. You're going to teach people about the pre-Christian evidence that we have from datable texts that show very unique things that are ultimately fulfilled in Jesus according to the evidence that we have, and that really couldn't be fulfilled at any other time because the events and things that had to be in place, like the temple and people following the law, aren't there anymore. So the Messiah, according to the way that he's presented in the Bible, wouldn't be able to appear right now. Or ever, really, unless things radically changed, right? And he rebuilt the temple in ways that people talk about and stuff, but not very likely, not without massive chaos and destruction. So it seems pretty likely that the evidence is the Messiah has come, that the texts have been fulfilled. The events that we have been told of historically that we can verify, give us the evidence we need to promote Jesus as the way, the truth, and the life. The principle he's taught us, the golden rule, is fair and beyond hypocrisy. So where's the problem, right? As long as we're not being abused and we're not abusing other people, as long as we're not lying to people to try to get rich and get them to follow us and view us as something special, right? Whether it's a chosen race, not talking about like the Bible says, right? We're a chosen race of royal priesthood as Christians, as people who don't make the distinctions between races. But when it comes to being special or chosen and things like that, right? We see that as something that makes us obligated to do more for other people, not for people to view us as something better than them. We're all the same. You may look to me or listen to me in some sense more so than others because I've studied or been involved with things, and so I have information that you find helpful. That's about it, right? I'm no more special than any of you or anyone else, other than what I choose to do with my time and abilities. That makes me special in the sense that I've actually done things that can benefit other people. So that's special, I guess. But that would be the same for anybody else who has done something or chosen to learn something in a way that would benefit other people. Anything more than that is vanity, right? And so, well, we can acknowledge people who have learned things and say, yeah, this person knows stuff and you can learn, but it's still not something that's foolproof. We don't just follow people because they are smart and they know stuff and they've helped us. Yeah, great. You helped us. You're smart. And now you're doing what? And you're not repenting? Okay. Well, I'll take the good stuff I learned from you and just keep doing that. Okay. I'm sorry you're no longer doing positive things. Right? We don't fall off. Right? We're convinced of the truth or we're not. And whoever may have taught us certain things, if they're no longer going to do those things, or we find out they're doing other things they shouldn't be doing, well, that doesn't give us an excuse to stop doing what we know is true. That just means we shouldn't keep doing what they're doing, right? What makes it hard sometimes with groups like the Society and others, because they do teach a lot of what's true, just like other groups, but Society too. And then we find out things they're teaching that are not true, and they won't listen, or they won't change, they won't stop doing them. And it's like, why are you doing that? It doesn't make any sense. There's no benefit to it. But then you look at it and it's like, oh, you're doing this because that's what you do. That's who you are. You are benefiting from it. You are misusing your position. You're not supposed to be doing that stuff. You're not supposed to be taking advantage of other people and elevating yourself and forcing people to accept you as something you're not, or listen to you as the voice of God, or to trust you completely. Nothing supports that in the Bible, and yet you say it constantly. So, in fact, I would encourage all of you. I know it'll be hard for a while, but it's going to be very hard on many Watchtower people ongoingly. It's been probably hard at different times, of course, but I'm talking right now. And as things get worse and worse for them, and they will, right? Because it's only going to get worse. The people leading them are clearly not following the master. They're continuing to promote things that are already shown to be in error, but that benefit them, that keep them in power. And they're continuing to manipulate people for resources, all to build all these structures and buildings that you don't even need. Why aren't they just meeting in homes? You know, the Watchtower people used to meet in homes, right? We used to have like the book study, and we would meet at the Kingdom Halls otherwise, but one night a week we'd meet at people's homes. And that's where we were supposedly going to be if the tribulation broke out and all that stuff, right? But why aren't they're not doing that anymore? Is it because that people are more compelled to donate when they're at the Kingdom Hall? I don't know, but what's wrong with meeting in people's homes? That's what the Bible teaches. And that's where people aren't compelled to donate and do things. And that's where people actually can go, and we don't have to pay for buildings. We don't have to donate, so you have to pay for all these things that you actually get for free because people do their labor for free, and maybe you have to pay for some materials, but you're not paying for a whole lot when it comes to these projects, right? And then we have to go to the Kingdom Halls and donate for them. Yeah, we're worshiping God, but we can do that at home. Stop giving them your money. You need your money, okay? Keep your money. Give it to people who are genuinely in need and who clearly can't take care of themselves at a certain point, so they need help badly, and you're there and you can take care of them like a good Samaritan. Help that person. Help those people. Then help them continue forward and get back on their feet and do their thing again. But stop giving your money to other people and then hoping that they somehow pass it on to people who are in need. Probably they're not. Probably they're just taking care of their own needs and providing some indirect benefit to others in the form of a place to come and congregate, which has benefits. But why not just in homes? No money required. You actually get to know people better. The person in whose home you're meeting has authority over whether to admit you or not. So the person can be responsible or not responsible for people that come in. And then, of course, you don't have these issues with lawsuits and potential abuse and stuff, right? And if you do, then it's just dealt with right then and there by the person who's taking care of the home, who's inviting you in the first place. To me, the benefits are just so obvious and clear, and then we don't have to take all the time and money to continuously develop these properties. Or why is that even happening? It is such a more simple way to do it. It doesn't involve any of those complicating factors. And of course, all the false doctrine, right? So we have none of that stuff. You guys are going to need to help a lot of Watchtower people at some point if you're not already. Some you can't. Don't overly try, right? Just when they're ready. If they really still want to do this, that's why they went to the Watchtower in the first place, like you and me, and worship God and follow Jesus and treat each other right. But then we found all this other stuff. So as they start to find out these things, you can tell them, hey, we meet together regularly. Like every Saturday, it's a live discussion. We talk, we interact, we partake, we talk about why it's important for you to do that. Don't worry, right? They've made so many people feel bad about being a Christian, partaking. Like if you're a Watchtower person, it's like, oh no, don't give me the bread and wine, right? Oh, or just give it to me and I'll pass it along, right? I remember, it's like, no way am I going to drink that, right? No way am I going to partake of that bread. It's like, you're not allowed, almost. If you did, you would be viewed like really suspiciously. And yet, it's crazy, huh? It's all based on a misunderstanding of chronology, which led them to believe that people were the great crowd as early as the 1930s. And of course, their chronology is wrong, and no one's the great crowd yet. No one's past the tribulation yet, even according to them. So we're in a situation where we have people who've been damaged in terms of like they're like afraid of the emblems, what we're going to partake in a moment. They're afraid. They're like, oh my God, oh, what are you doing, right? We have to help people, right? We might be able to help some of the Watchtower folks who are disillusioned with the society and the claims that they're making, the things they've said, and just show them, look, we're worshiping Jehovah. Oh, right here, yeah, one God the Father, no Trinity. Firstborn, yeah, all creation, Jesus, right? You can believe he's Michael or not. It's not something we enforce, but many believe he is Michael, but he's definitely an archangel. It says in 1 Thessalonians 4:16, but we try to be accommodating. Probably the biggest problem we'll have with Watchtower people is getting them to not be so judgmental, right? They'll get disillusioned with the society, and then they'll come over here and they'll be like the brothers from James and others who were, after learning the Christ, they started enslaving other people again with all the old ways, right? And so we'll get a lot of Watchtower people who come in because they're like, okay, well, I can worship Jehovah and Jesus here. Okay, I don't have to be a part of society anymore. But then they'll start telling us we have to believe Jesus is Michael. Or, oh, what? You allow the option of the Holy Spirit being an actual person, an actual like separate spirit from God, not God's spirit, even though you allow that too. Oh, I get it. It has to be God's spirit. Can't possibly be, right? And they'll start creating divisions over things that we don't divide over. So we have to watch that, or we have to help them understand that, no, you can believe that, we understand that, but there's evidence that shows it's not clear like one God the Father stuff. So we try to narrow it down to the very explicit things in the Bible, not make issues about other stuff that's potentially this or that metaphysically, right? It's metaphysics stuff. So we're trying not to be so dogmatic where we don't have to be. Or like with holidays, right? Watchtower people might have take a while to get over that. That while we don't require you to, you're allowed to. Right? We don't judge people over days, festivals, moons, whatever. That's biblical. Or partaking, right? It may take a while for Watchtower people to to even get used. No, it definitely will, right? They're not used to that. When they see this video and other videos where we've partaken, most watchdower people probably turn right off, right? It blows their mind. Oh, I can't believe he's doing that. How could he be anointed, right? Because their whole view of that is this limited group of people that are tied to this chronology that's not correct, and so they're viewing it in the same way that we all used to view it. They've changed so much that even though they still view it in a similar way, it's it's all nuts, right? It's all what they're not supposed to be doing. By refusing to listen to what the Bible says about dates, times, seasons, and the day and the hour, and what we're supposed to be doing and not doing, they have created all these problems. So, either way, let's see here. So that's important to keep in mind. We talked earlier kind of about how to deal with like the Black Hebrew Israelites and the difficulties that sometimes can be involved there, but how to be effective anyway. Same with groups like the Watchtower. When we know with the Trinity and stuff too, that every group has their own unique way of how we're going to need to consider them. But in terms of Watchtower, right, we have a lot of similar beliefs with them, and they know about me and others, and that we've defended many of the beliefs that they have. So there's definitely more of an association there that you could probably utilize to help people as they become more disillusioned with the Watchtower, but they still want to worship God, right? We don't want them to lose their faith. We don't want anybody to. Not Trinitarians, nobody. It doesn't mean we're not going to defend our doctrine and expose where they're teaching what's wrong, but we should be considerate towards some who are maybe not as difficult to deal with, and just realize, some people are in a position and place where, even with the Watchtower, we may not be able to effectively reach them at a certain time. And so we may just have to be more patient, allow them to continue to believe what we know is not true, but we know it's best for them at the time because they're not going to listen to us and plant seeds. But if we really can't effectively convince someone, then we could probably do more damage by over trying. Sometimes we have to learn to back off, come back another time, or they'll come to us, or something else will happen. Sometimes you might start to talk to someone, Trinitarian, Watch, or whatever, get to a point where it's like it's stuck or it won't go any further. Just back off a little. You don't have to hit a home run every time or convince someone. It's very rare, in fact, just like home runs, right? You don't hit a home run most of the time. You go up to bat. So we have to be satisfied with whatever takes place. We do our best. We try. We live with the result. And then maybe later on, right, what we said that day might affect a person or benefit them in some way. So we have to look at it very broadly in terms of its impact and how to measure that so we don't get discouraged talking to certain people who don't immediately accept what we're telling them. But some people might be more ready for others, so we can be thinking of that or aware of it if we see someone's really in need, or watch our person really in need of a place or people to start associating with, but who's basically looking for the same thing, but not the false teachings of the Watchtower. Well, then that's us, right? We're perfect. This ultimately, Watchtower people, all of you who watch this is where you need to be, right? Not because we're so special, right? But we're just like you in the key areas of faith that make this an ideal off-ramp for you. Right? Ultimately, you can do whatever you want. You do not have to be a Christian Witness of Jah. It's not a requirement. We don't view ourselves as special in that way. We think we're right. We're very confident. But we're also very aware that we're not the person deciding who's acceptable. We allow and accommodate other people as much as we can without compromising. But in terms of like for you, and you're just disillusioned with the organization and the things they taught and require of you, this is perfect for you. Right? This will allow you to become your own person in a way that is appropriate according to what's actually taught in the Bible, so that you're not forced to do things that aren't necessary. all while you're also learning to accommodate other people who, like you, aren't forced to do things other than the very explicit things that define who we are. Who we worship, one God, who we follow, who we promote, who we have faith in, one Messiah, Son of God, and how we treat other people. The way we want to be treated, fairly, respectfully, and where we're wrong, firmly, right? We want someone to correct us where we need it so we don't make a mistake. So we do the same thing to other people who've made a mistake. Try to help them. But if we can't help them, they won't listen. Well, some point, right, we have to allow them to be. So, I hope that helps you in terms of like considering ways to deal with difficult issues or difficult groups and how we can better understand our potential involvement with persons who are either looking for a group to belong to continue to worship the same way, or who are somewhat different but who have similar faith, like the Black Hebrew Israelites, right? But they have different beliefs and ways that are more exclusive to them. So whether it's the Watchtower, right, and they have different beliefs that are more exclusive to them. Everybody's getting exclusive from everybody. Everyone wants to be special. You want to be special according to the Bible? You want to be the most special person? I know how you can do it. I have the formula. I have the secret. Oh, well, it's not that secret. Although the way people often act while simultaneously wanting you to treat them as special makes it seem like it almost is, right? Let's just go ahead and read it together so that we can take care of things the right way. And then we'll do our bread and wine ceremony as Christians. Wrap things up. I'll be back tomorrow. Special live show. Don't want to miss it. Let me just bring up a text here for you. And then we'll get going. Text where Jesus gives us a fine example of what we're supposed to do and how we can be special too. Like him. If you're a person who believes in the Bible and in the Messiah of the Bible, the New Testament, Jesus, this is how you can be special. After that, he put water into a basin and he started to wash the feet of the disciples and to dry them off with the towel with which he was girded. And so he came to Simon Peter. He said to him, and so he came to Simon Peter. And he, that is Simon Peter, said to him, that is Jesus, Lord, why are you washing my feet? In answer, Jesus said to him, what I am doing, you do not understand at present. Why not? Why wouldn't he understand this at present? Isn't it something pretty common? Like basic that they do some at times, that they're familiar with culturally in terms of how they would at times honor people and guests in their home? But why don't they understand this? Because they don't expect him to be doing it, right? It doesn't make sense. He's like better. They think he's better than this. They don't understand, right? That's why he asked the question, Lord, are you washing my feet? Are you washing my feet? What are you doing? You're the Lord. You're like way above this. So that's why he says, you don't understand this. This basic thing that you know happens, it's confusing you because I'm doing it. And you believe I'm special. and I am. But you will understand after these things. Peter said to him, you will certainly never wash my feet, right? Proof he doesn't understand, right? Because what's Peter thinking? Peter's thinking he's honoring Jesus, right? He's not being disrespectful. He's not like denying Jesus here because he's being mean to Jesus, right? Like he doesn't want Jesus to touch him. That's not what's happening. He's saying this, he's objecting to him to try to honor him, right? Because Peter looks at him as special. He's like, Lord, are you washing my feet? No, no way. That's not happening. You're too good. You're too special. Jesus answered him, unless I wash you, unless you let me do what you think I'm too good to do, you have nothing to do with me. Simon Peter said to him, Lord, not my feet only, but also my hands and my head, okay? Oh, fine. If you put it that way, let's just do it all, right? I want it all then. Jesus said to him, he that is bathed does not need to have more than his feet washed, but is wholly clean. You men are clean, but not all. The feet got the most dirty back then. They're walking around all the time and not with the kind of protective wear that we have. He knew indeed, verse 11, who was betraying the man betraying him. That's why he said, not all of you are clean. Verse 12, when now he had washed their feet and had put his outer garments on, laid himself down at the table, and he said to them, do you know what I have done to you? Verse 13, you address me teacher and Lord, and you speak rightly, for I am such. Verse 14, therefore, if I, although Lord and teacher, washed your feet, you also ought to wash the feet of one another. Right? And now, culturally, historically, washing of the feet was done more, again, as I said, because of the way they traveled and the dirt and the need for taking care of one's feet in that way when they came to rest in a home. Versus today, but there can be many equivalent ways in which we can not only greet but welcome and take care of people who might view us as better than them, showing that we're not, but by doing that we're just as good as the one who's better than everyone. And isn't that what Jesus does and why we say he can be called God? It's very similar, but different in terms of what we are and what we do. But that's why he's raised by God, right? It says that in Philippians, because he lowered himself. Because he did this very thing, that's what made him elevated. Not because he was God eternally, but because he lowered himself and did what he knew was right to do. The same with us. We're not going to become elevated by God or by Jesus unless we lower ourselves and think of ourselves as a slave, not by demeaning ourselves or by letting other people take advantage of us. That's not what is being talked about. It's talking about taking care of people who worship the Father, taking care of people in this way who follow the Son, who are going to be there with you and die, confessing the one who came and who died for us all. So if we can't do these things for the people who would do those things, which is the whole reason we do our thing, what are we actually doing? If we don't have this attitude, we're not doing what he told us to do. You know these things, happy you are if you do them. Slave is not greater than his master, nor is one sent forth greater than the one who sent him, right? He's above us. So if he does it, right, he's better than everyone. Again, we forget this. A lot of people forget this, and that they talk about us in his name, talk about him and the way they view themselves as special in a way that doesn't really fit the way he was special. So we never want to forget these basic truths and things that will help us to determine, okay, you're not really treating people the way the master treated others, and he was teacher and Lord. You claim you're faithful and discreet. Why aren't you out here giving other people money? You want them to give you money? For what? So you can build another structure that you own and can sell whenever you want? When they can worship in their homes and build a stronger community that isn't dependent upon you? No. How about no? We'll just do it a different way, and whatever God chooses to support will grow. Whatever he doesn't will go. So, with that in mind, let us move towards our Christian ritual. I'll give you a couple moments if you're going to participate in the drinking of what represents Christ's blood and the partaking of that which represents his flesh. And of course, like him, we thank the Father for everything he's done for us, for forgiving us for our sins, for giving us our daily bread and protection, for forgiving us for the mistakes we make and delivering us from temptation that comes from the wicked one, and looking after the poor and the lowly until his kingdom comes, brings about his will for the earth, and makes his name known throughout heaven and earth as Jah, the one whom all creation praises in Revelation 19. In the name of the Son, Jesus Christ. Amen, right? So I thank you all for joining me. I very much value our time together, and it's only getting better and better. I'm glad we decided to do this Christian Witnesses of Jah live discussion. It's better, I think, than open session for our purposes. I'll still do open sessions for just more general discussion of certain topics, but this really gives us an opportunity to come together as one, just like Jesus said we would in John 17, just like he and the Father are one. So with that, I bid you good night, good morning, good day, depending on where you are. I will be back tomorrow around this same time or a little earlier for another live show. I'll put up a notice tomorrow so you can prepare for it. But until then, may Jah bless you. In Jesus' name.